Welcome to the CoLab podcast series, brought to you by Cresco, a law firm with an exclusive focus on entrepreneurship. In this podcast, we take you behind the scenes with some of today's most driven entrepreneurs, industry leaders, and innovators. We hope these conversations will not only inform but also inspire you on your own journey in business. Let's dive into today's episode.
So, welcome to CoLab, Katleen, and this is the podcast series of Cresco. You're the second person that I'm interviewing. My name is David Essers. I'm founding partner of Cresco, active myself in venture capital, M&A, and complex B2B transactions. I'm very excited to sit down with you, Katleen Vandersmissen, managing partner of Heran Partners, a HealthTech and MedTech focused venture capital fund. To start, who are you? What have you done in the past? What are you currently doing? And what are your plans for the future?
Okay. Yeah, first of all, thank you very much for the invitation to be here. Very happy also to indeed share the story of myself and Heran Partners in this forum. And to start with this first question, so education-wise, I was very scientifically oriented, very mathematical, always triggered. So I studied chemistry, so pure plain chemistry, and did a PhD on the back of that. And then, but immediately knew in the PhD, I would like to work with people, like only in a lab with like a computer and a test case. That wasn't for me. So I joined Umicore as head of an analytical lab, both doing R&D and quality control there. I think was a great adventure. I had a great supervisor at that moment that also gave me room to do other things. So I started to embarking also on more investment projects within the lab. And that triggered me more on the financial side. So I did a post-grad corporate finance. And then I also briefly did investor relations for Umicore, something completely different. I wanted to a little bit explore horizons. But I have to say it was less of a successful endeavor because it was the job was too communications focused and too less content and didn't fit me. But then I joined McKinsey. A little bit exploring, like, okay, I wanted to see new things, but didn't know exactly where to head. I think a strategic consultant is a good option then to broaden horizon. Embark there as an experienced hire. It's a typical, a challenging experience, I think, if you join a strategic consultant. If you're already, I was approaching 30, different type of way of working then. But I think it was very... a good experience to indeed broaden horizon, meet new people, see what I like, what I don't like. And then also life happens. Yeah? I got a first child. And then it was a challenging lifestyle to combine with a baby. So then decided to switch. And very actually accidentally then bumped into venture capital. It's almost 12 to 13 years ago. I started with LRM, so the investment firm of Limburg, the province of Limburg, where I immediately had a click with one of the managers at that time. It was the CEO, Stijn Bijnens, which resonated, and they were looking for somebody with both a technical as a financial background, so that matched. Actually, I embarked on that job without really actually knowing too well what venture capital was, but I think it's a very nice sector where both technology and innovation and building a business, the numbers, and certainly also people come together. So I never left. So that's indeed 7 years. I worked at LRM, the last half of that heading the health and care practice, met two very successful, inspiring entrepreneurs in that journey, co-investing in deals, being my co-founders within Heran, Annie Verreke and Herman Verelst. And then in 2019, there was their idea to start something independently, something separate from their business angel, family office activities, to more institutionalize that. And I was 7 years into my journey with LRM, kids a little bit older, and I took the jump and I never regretted. So we're 5 years later and indeed having a successful fund, grew the team. So very happy to be at the place where we are.
Yeah, and can you elaborate? I know you have two very known co-founders who, and the difference of they come from the sector. Mm-hmm. They've created several businesses, made them grow. And that's, of course, a huge asset to have, when you have an industry focus as a fund. Can you elaborate on what Heran Partner specifically focuses on, and what are the key trends that you see within those focus areas?
I think we focus on MedTech and HealthTech, like you said in the intro, but we took the angle of enabling technologies. So in contrast to some other funds, we're a little bit agnostic if it's hardware, software, or services. We always like data. That's maybe a trend we like to invest upon, but we're a little bit agnostic of what the solution is, but it has to be a solution filling an unmet need into the market. So we more come from that than being software or hardware focused only. And what's really specific also on us, and it has to do indeed also with how the founding team is set up, is that entrepreneurial spirit, like really also co-crafting with the teams even before we invest. What's your business plan? What's your go-to-market? Is it not only a technology seeking a solution, but does it really fit that need? And very specific also towards venture, you have limited resources, both in time, money, people. You only can spend €1 once, and you have to choose. And then also regulatory is a big issue also in healthcare. Choose that right path to prove what you need to prove and make more of a stepwise approach. And in that way also mitigating risk. I think that's really specific for us. And I think we just, in the current future, we're launching a new, also more marketing branding. And we chose as a tagline, fuel for bold innovators. And I think that's a little bit what we want to be. Yeah? So we not only want to be giving money to people, but also inspiration, asking the right questions, that experience, bringing that to the table. And we really look for that innovation part. And you have to be a little bit bold to embark on big things that maybe nobody else sees at this moment. And that's a little bit what we like to stand for. And towards of the founding team, it's a very good mix, I think, from Annie having built with private equity a big clinical lab and later being a very successful business angel. Herman also doing public companies, working in a big company as Agilent, having really also that tech transfer knowledge. And then with the rest of the team, and also with me, bringing more also that's institutional investment approach. And I think it's a good balance, like stretching one side, other side, you need everything into the mix.
Yeah. And what are the key trends that you see in health tech and medtech?
Yeah.
Because, when we've worked on these cases, the capital needs are also because of the regulatory part, of course, pretty substantial.
Yeah. In trends, we see data as a trend, and it plays on multiple factors. It's the quality of data, which is mostly not very good. So I think there's a lot to do, both in measuring tools like more life science tooling, bringing new data to the market, but also curating that data and putting that in the right context. And on the other side, I think biology is one of the scientific fields where there's still so much to learn. In oncology and neurology, we only know, like, for instance, 1 to 10% of what's happening. So I think also there it's very research intensive. And I think we like to play on those fields where we see that unmet need still very high. I think one specific example is everything that has to do with precision medicine. People growing older, not having one disease, having comorbidities, giving very complex type of images of a patient to treat, and you get more and more technologies giving data about the patients and then treatment matching. And there you have a lot to do, both in diagnostics, in therapy development, in R&D discovery, where you see AI coming in. And you have indeed also the complete AI hype, where we try to stay very sober in approaching that, and also approaching that far more from how can we have the right data. So a lot of our companies always have a data play. For instance, they have a hardware component and they measure things, but on the back of that, we also gather data, and with that data, you can generate new insights.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, certainly the AI angle. It's every sector industry for us as well.
Yeah.
People, legal AI will replace lawyers, and how do you? And clients ask, what are you doing with AI? And I don't know if you saw Rob Heijwaard did a big investment in the fintech, and what I really liked what he said is, he was skeptical on AI and saying we are a fast follower. And for example, when we look at solutions, for our industry, very often they're imperfect is an understatement. I mean, and certainly in your sector, I mean, when we use these tools, the output has to be correct and 100% correct. I mean, you cannot have a 99%, and of course that with AI, I mean, you just cannot in your space apply these tools just not knowing whether the output will be accurate.
I think it's also a very broad spectrum. You had a lot to do. I think the hype is a little bit gone now with the large language models, where indeed I think certainly in healthcare it's a language model, and biology is for me not mathematics. I think there's still a big jump to take. And then on the other side, you have different type of point solutions in AI which we believe in. For instance, in radiology, where you really have an image, you can really train it, and with the right training data, you really can get those models at a very high level. But there indeed, mostly there is still a physician involved or somebody to check, and you build in some quality labels or some warning levels where the AI is less certain. So I think it's also a very broad spectrum if you talk about AI. I think it can have very added value solutions in more point solutions. If you look to the large language models, I think there we're more skeptical, and we took the approach like that also there. I think you see that trend coming. The data input and the training data, that will be the value. And that's certainly in healthcare.
Smaller, very super specialized models that are being developed.
Yeah, and not the general. You can do like with a ChatGPT, you can describe a patient and you will get a highly likely outcome of what the patient can have. But still that's indeed not how healthcare works. It has to be correct. The adverse effects are too high.
And maybe focusing on the investment activities. I mean, I can call you an early stage investor, you're very often the first investor on the cap table. I mean, how do you source founders? What do you look at? What is important? And what drives your investment decisions?
Yeah, indeed, we do both seed. So then we're certainly the first one and mostly also the only one investor, and then some Series A. I think certainly if you look to seed, it has to be something that we know very well ourselves. That's a little bit, for instance, we did an investment in immune spec. It's a mass spec platform in immunology. It's something that Annie and I both, as more chemist, pharmacy background, really know well. Then we can go very early. And then it's bringing that company also out of university, really guiding the company in tech transfer. And how do those companies come across us? I think certainly if they're local, they will find us. We get referrals through the network. They will find us. On the other side, we also try to hold close relationships with similar funds abroad. I think that relationship, certainly in VC, you do a lot of syndication, and knowing funds locally that have the same fine-maced network as we have more in the Benelux and in the UK, that also helps to get quality deal flow. So for the more advanced files, certainly also through other funds. We also try to be, I think we can be, due to the specific focus, a thought leader, that you also really on conferences have a keynote, be in a panel, and in that way also become visible as these are investors that really know what they're talking about. Yeah. So I think those are the two ways.
I mean, with the focus you have, you cannot be a generalist investing. You do not know what the founders are talking about, basically, if that were the case. And maybe in the companies in which you have invested, are most of them spin-offs of universities?
A lot of them have relationships. No, I think like half will be, if even a little bit more, will be spin-offs. Will be really spin-offs where we invest sometimes within that spin-off trajectory, but also some of those companies are a little bit more in a stealth mode, like for 3-4 years, do more subsidy type of work, and a little bit like are very little cash burning, but we come across them and we see a technology that has bigger potential, but sometimes the scientific team doesn't see that. And then we try to also lift them up. But even those that aren't really spin-offs mostly have close relationships with universities, in projects, in key opinion leaders, which are very important to have those in a healthcare space investing, have your sponsors, your mentors within the industry to get that across. So I think almost all of them will have those links.
Yeah. And what are your experiences with tech transfer in general from universities?
It depends. It depends on the file. It depends on the founders. I think you certainly see a maturity with some universities versus others. I think certainly we did 2 UK deals, which are one is King's College and the other is Cambridge. You see they have a far larger and broader history within that field. I think if universities had very successful experience with spinning off companies and really letting go and really putting their IP really into the equity, not keeping licenses or backfalls, they are very more easier to deal with, know indeed how a VC works. I think smaller universities without really already a successful track record sometimes proves to be more difficult. I think it's certainly that you see it maturing, but indeed there is still some work to do.
What you also see is that, we work a lot in spinning out companies, and when we read about it, the research, if you look at a cap table, how it looks after 2 rounds in a typical European university spin-off versus an American spin-off, then founders, management, postdocs that have left the mothership and have joined the startup, their equity stakes are pretty small, and you sometimes see that as posing issues for follow-on rounds.
That's true indeed. It has to be the right balance, and I think sometimes that's also why we like to be there early. Then you can a little bit also guide that cap table. Sometimes you also see in that type of companies business angels coming in quite early, and also too many dilution already in the cap table towards founders, and then you have to juggle it around and look for solutions. But I think that's also, we also did that recently, advice on a company saying, actually we like the technology, but your cap table, sorry, can't deal with that. And then we also try to give them some ammunition then to negotiate with the tech transfer they're dealing with, or with in this case, it was a hospital more and some more individual physicians on that cap table. So I think that also has to do with an ecosystem maturing and founders also getting there the right advice, and not starting the company and then only realizing that they maybe didn't do the right structure.
And what advice do you have for entrepreneurs in your sector when they look for funding? From what I see in practice or read, we've gone through exuberant years, and since the last 2 years, I don't know if you can call it the valley of death, but we do see certainly life science focused, really decent companies that need to raise more funding, and there's just no funding at all available. How do you look at these things? And
I think indeed there was some free money at a certain moment, and everything got funded. And I think now for the decent companies, they will still be able to secure funding, but there has to be some realism also in valuations, I think. And sometimes indeed you see now companies that are valued less than the money they raised, but also due to maybe spending too much money on things that weren't that valuable. I think that's one thing. I think what's very important is something, if I refer back to what I said in the beginning, is that unmet need. I think if the market is clear and you really have an innovative product, you just need the right investor that also knows that market, and then it will resonate. And I think what's also important to build that relationship, and not if you push them too hard already to put something on the table and put a term sheet, but you didn't spend time educating them on what you're doing, I think that will be difficult. We also see companies that sometimes not really say what they were doing or what their plans are very protective about what they're developing, don't want to share what they're doing in depth, but only give the tip of the iceberg. For us, that also doesn't work. We really want to know what are you doing. You have to also be open about what works, what doesn't work. Be transparent, because if we in a due diligence going further and further and discover things, I think that's really detrimental to a file. You don't want to have surprises.
And do you often have to deal with corporates in partnerships, corporate and investors? Because to elaborate, with several companies now that what they build is super useful, but their customer base ultimately, they are, for example, big life science companies And it's like, okay, you have to be able to support us worldwide, provide maintenance and support on a worldwide basis. And in order to build that, it's just not possible. And then partnering, and then you get into these, super complicated discussions on, okay, I'm a big corporate and I will partner with you, but I will make you big. But at the same time, I would ultimately like to buy you.
Yeah.
I mean, what's your view on corporates in your sector and co-investing with corporates?
Yeah, we have some corporates in some of our companies. I think we always try to keep them very small if they want to invest. And sometimes it's good indeed if they invest that they're also more engaged into the partnerships that you do. We try to, and it's not always possible. I think the ideal is that you have 1 to 2 corporates that you can separately, simultaneously push a little bit forward. We mostly try to get them in some more product development, R&D type of projects where they fund their own innovation, but you still have innovations next to it. I think it's a little bit comparable what you see in biotech. For instance, you have a platform for compounds, you license out 2 and you keep 2. I think that's important to keep that balance within the company, to not put all your eggs in one basket. And we have that, for instance, in one of our companies with a corporate, they wanted to invest. We kept them very small. There was enough money to do the equity round. So they don't have no board seat, no observer. They have little information rights. But on the back of that, we also did an R&D project on something that was not core for the company, but in this way we could also develop that. I think those are ideal situations if you can maneuver there. And for corporates, one corporate is not the other. I think that's also, as an entrepreneur, I think do your due diligence. Sometimes it's the corporate venturing arm is just a corp dev arm. And sometimes it's really a venture capital fund. I think with Illumina, within our sector, Illumina Ventures, it's really a separate venture arm. It's not only Illumina being an LP, they also have other LPs, completely different to deal with those guys than if, for instance, you do a corporate development now for another bigger company.
Yeah, it's complicated, and if not well structured, it destroys value. But at the same time, if it's well structured, it generates an enormous amount of value.
I think it's also important on which timing that you bring them in. I think we did it already once, very concrete, that you start talking to some of those parties in a growth round. So the company already has some substance and has some proven record, and that it evolves towards an exit.
Yeah,
I think, or a partnerships evolves to an exit. I think certainly maybe you have the idea, you leave some value on the table because you maybe sell the company earlier than you were planned to, but sometimes it's better if they're really interested in a substantial equity stake to just try to maneuver to an exit.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. I mean, very often when you have these discussions, you make your objectives very clear up front. I mean, these are, in a positive way, the red lines, and this is non-negotiable, and you explain why that is. And I also feel that if the ones who really understand and have good intentions, they work with you. And if you have an aggressive reaction to that, then it's indeed like, okay, I'm just buying optionality, and then you have to explain, yes, but why do you treat me different from a financial investor? Well, the answer is best because you are different. I mean, you have different objectives, right?
Yeah.
And this investment you make, you don't do it for that investment. You do it to create optionality.
Yeah.
Sometimes on the cheap.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and I think that's also of entrepreneurs asking that to their investors to do that due diligence, because mostly they have a better view on that. You have platforms enough where you can look at M&A history and corporate investing history of corporates, and you see immediately what their goal is. To just look for your intel, and that tells a lot already.
Yeah. Looking back on your career in general, there's a clear path. I mean, you've explained, of course, where you started, Umicore, then McKinsey, LRM, and the focus towards health tech and life sciences. Is it correct to state that you started more as a generalist and then specialized further? I mean, how do you look back, and what advice would you give to others on how to build their career?
I think eventually I ended up where in high school a little bit wanted to go but didn't go. I was very intrigued to study maybe medicine, but I thought it was too long, and that was that. I think I also mentioned it in the beginning, it also has to do with not always the job you take, but the boss you work for. I think it's very important there also to choose people that you are inspired by and that give you the opportunity to grow and to explore. Because if I look back, and I was 18 when you chose some studies, then I was 23 finishing my PhD, choosing a job, but eventually you don't know anything. And you have to, I think, experience a lot to see what do I like and what can I do well. And I think it's sometimes also saying yes to things you a little bit doubt about and just taking that jump and taking on different type of journeys there, different type of jobs. That's a little bit what I did. And then I think I ended up in something that I really like, and I also know my way around. But it's not like you also change as a person. So I think the career advice I mostly give, if you doubt, is this something for me? Just try it. Mm-hmm. What's the worst that can happen? That you have to look for another job, but that's not the end of the world. Yeah. And I think at a certain moment, if you really feel, and not everybody has that you have that drive to really change things, and you maybe feel corporate environment is not going fast enough yet, just try to do something on your own. I think that's certainly something you learn. That's also what I did. At a certain moment, I really loved LRM. It's a house that gave me a lot. So I got like the playing field to learn this job, which I didn't really know up front. But at a certain moment, you also feel like maybe this is because it has a specific focus, you have a specific structure. I want to do more. I see things I want to do, but I can't in this setting. And
that's true. Yeah, I mean, the same. We, and like you say, having mentors. I was very lucky as well with the first person I worked for, who was super demanding, but I learned a lot from him. And then later on, before we started Cresco, as I was not super happy at my previous firm, and never shy to talk to people about it, and not just sit on it. And I spoke to some entrepreneurs we work with, and I said, I'm stuck in this situation. What do I do? Yeah. And unanimously was, you have to leave. Yeah. You have to leave, start your own thing, and we'll support you. Yeah. And we'll follow you in whatever you do. And I think that is very, important that you see so many people that are unhappy in what they do, and life is very short.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and it's also not always choosing the easy route there. It's like, for me, I think it's also a little bit following your gut instinct. They always say, I need the facts, but I think it's also important in VC. It's not only IQ, it's not only analyzing a business case, it's also a lot to do with EQ. Who are the people? How do I feel about the people? And somebody, indeed, also more a mentor-like person once said to me, you shouldn't dismiss what you're feeling. If your gut's feeling is saying something is off, it's because you're seeing things, maybe subconsciously, that are off. They're giving you that feeling. It's not just the feeling that you have to put away. I think it's the same in a job. If you feel this isn't for me, you shouldn't try to over-rationalize why it is something for you. You have to be also a little bit, I say, prudent in not jumping on everything that moves. But if you really feel like this is not working, you just have to change scenery. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And what is your expectation? Like health tech and MedTech, how is it evolving? And also from I see that in different sectors, also from the regulatory perspective, whether regulators are not maybe overdoing it a bit too much in terms of, I see it in other domains, and it's like, the burdens that are being put on companies and investors that are detrimental to the competitiveness of Europe, I think.
Certainly also in life science and healthcare, you see that with like an FDA trajectory that's easier, more straightforward, therefore not easier to pass, but easier in terms of timelines than now with an MDR regulation in Europe, where you can't find a notified body just to do your audit, and where you're on waiting lists, that your product just is delayed for 1.5 years. also has to do a little bit what you impose in GDPR, in all those type of things. The AI Act, we see that also in a lot of our companies. It's a lot of, I get it's with the best intentions, but it's a lot of bureaucracy for small companies, putting a lot of burden on them. Also in terms of ESG, which we think is very important, but you have to be pragmatic in those.
Yeah. It's very, very much sometimes it feels it's form over substance, right? So I remember last year I went to listen to a talk of Van der Leyen, who was fantastic. I mean, she's a great lady, fantastic, and an AI entrepreneur in the room asked her the question at the end of the talks, like, okay, but what is Europe going to do in order to increase competitiveness and help, in this case, entrepreneurs in AI? And her answer was, we set the regulatory standard. So, and I think this whole room was like, I mean, did we hear correctly what she just said? And then you see now, I mean, and indeed with the best of intentions, but big tech companies that simply do not roll out certain features because they say, well, we don't think we can be compliant with. So, I mean, I would hope that there would be a change, and that with the new commission, at least they...
I think within the Mario Draghi report, there is indeed some indication, like we have to be careful here because we're missing not only one train, but several trains. The question is indeed, will it go fast enough? I also don't know, because you have, that's indeed Europe. Certainly also from a healthcare perspective, it's far easier to roll something out in the US because you have one unified market. It's more elaborate. You have private insurances which you can talk to. Okay, the healthcare system in Europe is far better from a patient point of view, but from a commercial point of view, it's already very difficult in Europe. And you don't want to see everything moving. Also, all the big companies are almost US-based. So I think it's certainly also a strategy we have in a lot of our companies to just US first in commercial strategies. And that's actually, I think it's a pity indeed, because we have a lot of innovation. We last week had a Heran Investor Day, with also a panel. I think we have a lot of innovation, a lot of scientists. But sometimes we lack indeed structure to move fast. It goes from regulation, which is too stringent in some ways, or too much being the best pupil of the class, and less of saying, let's just see where it goes and then you set boundaries. I think sometimes that's better. And then on the other side, also from a capital point of view, we're already a little bit behind the US. I think we're certainly more cash efficient. And also I think in terms of the EIF had a report on that, in terms of IRR, we're at par or even better. But just the deployment of large chunks, if you really want to grow companies further, I think that's really something that's difficult.
And the creation really of, I mean, 10 years ago in Belgium, I mean, the number of VC funds you had was of course very limited, and you had an enormous boom. I mean, you have set up your fund and many others, and it goes up to a certain size. And then, I mean, the other people we work with, they say, okay, we cannot grow bigger than this in this market, and with the investors we have, and these super deep pools of capital, where you, instead of 50 million, you raise a 500 million fund. That was certainly in our home market. It's the same usual suspects, and I do believe that public investors are very important, and that we should not be naive, because all other regions and countries do the same.
You see it also, I think in the Netherlands, you have a lot of pension funds, also more health insurers that really pool money in certain areas, and also maybe a government having a more strategic view on that, with InvestNL, backed by Philips and ASML, really saying, okay, deep tech, that's our card we're going to play, and we go all in, and you get like an innovation industry that jumped from a 150 million fund to a 500 million fund. And indeed, in a Belgian context, it's unthinkable. You can't get that done. It's
we just don't have
that
those
money is not
institutional
available.
investors.
I think certainly also in the Belgian VC market, and very much respect for all those people, because otherwise also Heran wouldn't exist. You really have to rely a lot on private individuals and family offices really backing that complete venture capital ecosystem, which in other countries, also France, you have far more institutional backing.
Yeah.
And that's really an issue indeed to grow, because that only goes that far.
Yeah. I mean, what inspires you in your work and outside of your work?
I think I said the word already, I think it's also innovation. I think it's curiosity. I always want to know more. I think VC is certainly also a job of asking questions, but also reading people, getting to know people. It's also sometimes the onset that makes me want to do an investment or not to do an investment. And I think also it's very important to also have a home base to keep me grounded. And sometimes indeed that balance, I don't think there is a balance. It goes like completely that side of the spectrum and then completely that side of the spectrum. But I think indeed sometimes stepping out. I like to do sports. I like to also bike. I did like a bike trip to Compostela in May. With a group of 40 women for Think Pink. So we biked from Pamplona to Compostela. It's 7 days on a bike. It was really terrible weather. It rained a lot. But still, I think you meet very different people, but everybody has a little bit the same mindset. You hear different stories. I think it's something that really makes you step out of your normal way of doing. And then you also approach things in a different type of way. I think it's always good also my family, my husband and my children to keep me grounded for certain times, like saying, this is important, not that phone call. And indeed, I think meeting a lot of people, I also like to, like they say, give back. I'm on the board of a secondary school and also in some kind of a service organization where we organize type of things and for more... for children that are in difficult home situations. I think that gives a different perspective on life. And also, I think, it broadens the horizon. I think that's always important to not be like, how do I say it in English? That you're not down the rabbit hole always, that you have to come out and keep a perspective and then see things differently.
Yeah, it's true. It's if you're, and of course, I mean, you were a first-time own fund manager, if I can call it like that. And for us, those are entrepreneurs as well. And the focus that you have to make these things work and to juggle and combine that with, having a personal life. Do you also there see, and it's a question we ask, do you also see a generational difference there? For example, if the founders you see, the people you hire for your own funds. I think you see that. I think it's indeed, you have to go, it's a little bit all in if you do your own venture. And I think indeed you see some kind of a generational difference, but I don't want to generalize there. But I think it's, I also see it towards Annie, which is still, she was the only woman in like an old boys club. For her, it's even more that. I think my generation now, if you say like 40-ish, I think we're a little bit skewed between those two, like saying wanting to do a lot, but still having that family life. And I think the younger ones sometimes have a better balance. But also, now I have to be careful if I sound old. Also, still sometimes I have to realize not everything comes by itself. You also have to put in the hard work. That is also has to do with economic cycles. I mean, I've gone through, I would say, 3 big economic cycles. At the end of the .com boom, and then how difficult it is to hire people, and then after the financial crisis, and now a bit again after the bust. And that is a question of offer and demand. And that if you would have a job market that would not be so tight, people have the luxury of working wherever they want to work, basically. And that is for generations who have not known that. I mean, when I started my career, it certainly was not like that. You really had to fight to get a good job. I'm not saying that they don't have to fight now, but it's like, okay, I have 4 offers on the table versus 1. and that the mindset. But I mean, it's true. We interview a lot of people, and we certainly find plenty of people with the right balance.
Yeah. I think it's also the drive, and sometimes that more has to do with how you grew up. That I think we always look for those people also with Heran, and I certainly look for that in my entrepreneurs. You need somebody that needs to prove something to himself, because that's why you put in the effort.
I think also people who have gone through adversity, who have built stamina, resistance.
If you've encountered some things, I think I have it myself. My parents were divorced when I was very young, so you have to grow up a little bit, and certainly in the early 90s, late 80s, now it's a little bit more well structured. I think it sets you in a certain, you have to grow up, you have to give a different type of atmosphere. And then indeed that gives you a little bit, it's like the fuel for both, that's that fuel that you also need internally to get things going, to getting things done.
Okay. Well, thank you, Katleen. It was very enjoyable and interesting.
Likewise.
I learned a lot from your story, and will be very eagerly watching at what you do next.
Thank you very much again for the invitation. Really enjoyed it.
Okay, thank you. Okay.